BRICS 2025. A strategic tug-of-war over markets and geopolitics. What it means for Europe and America. Today we're unpacking the 2025 BRICS Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and how this emerging market alliance is shaking the foundations of global economics, especially in Europe and the Americas. With notable absences, veiled messaging, and loud tariff threats from former US President Trump, this summit tells us more about global constraints than breakaway ambitions. Let's dive in. The 17th BRICS Summit took place on July 6–7, 2025, in Rio de Janeiro, under Brazil's leadership. Heads of state from Brazil, India, South Africa, Indonesia, Iran, Egypt and others attended, but both Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin skipped the event amid geopolitical headwinds. Despite that, the bloc issued a carefully worded communiqué, a tactical blend of reaffirmations on multilateral cooperation and veiled critiques of rising protectionism. Without naming the US, they expressed serious concerns about the rise of unilateral tariff and non-tariff measures inconsistent with WTO rules. They also highlighted global volatility, supply chain risks, and emphasized AI, global health, and economic development, topics chosen deliberately to avoid direct confrontation with Washington. BRICS now make up around 40% of global GDP and half the world's population, with a soon-to-be 11-member format. That matters for Europe and North America. BRICS countries are major trade, investment, and supply chain partners. Disruption in any of these areas creates ripple effects. Trade volatility. BRICS rebuked unilateral tariffs, warning they distort trade, reduce global trade, disrupt global supply chains, and introduce uncertainty. These signals can tighten raw material and food supplies, inflating input costs in Europe and America. Financial fragmentation. Beyond trade, BRICS discussed alternatives like local currency payment systems, blockchain-based platforms, and a potential new reserve currency that may pose mid- to long-term challenges to the supremacy of the dollar, though any bold moves were postponed at the summit. Strategic hedging. Major European and American companies with strong exposure to BRICS must watch this bloc carefully. It's shifting from occasional resistance to a more coherent, collective positioning. No script on BRICS in 2025 is complete without Trump's tariff threats. Over the summit weekend, Trump took to Truth Social and other platforms to announce a pending 10% tariff on all BRICS imports, and even threaten up to 50% 100% tariffs against Brazil for perceived political missteps. This is more than just economics, it's signaling. A test of BRICS unity. By lumping Indonesia, India, Brazil, and Iran together, Trump aimed to fracture the bloc and discourage deeper institutional cooperation. A warning shot to European allies. Germany, France, and others have likewise faced the unpredictability of US trade policy. For example, vehicle tariffs in April this year sparked turbulence across auto supply chains. Domestic political leverage. Trump's moves reflect domestic, America first, narrative aimed at showing economic toughness, even if outcomes are ambiguous. The result? International businesses and investors are on edge. FT analysts note this approach has unsettled business and disrupted supply chain decisions, steering firms toward regional diversification. BRICS member countries didn't stay silent. President Lula of Brazil directly rejected Trump's tone. "We don't want an emperor," he said, and reminded the world that Brazil is sovereign. Brazil announced reciprocal tariffs in response to Trump's threat on its exports. Other states, China, South Africa, Russia, warned against protectionism and called for win-win cooperation, sometimes softly addressing the US, often without explicit mention. Their posture? Pragmatic hedging, pursuing autonomy through multilateralism while avoiding sweeping moves that might trigger economic backlash. Financial markets simmer. After the summit, markets, especially currencies, emerging market equities, and commodities, experienced bouts of volatility. Investors are pricing in possible tariff escalations. Supply chain realignment. Manufacturers, auto, electronics, agriculture, are accelerating shifts away from volatile markets, exploring Europe-Asia or US-Mexico corridors. Exporters to Europe need to watch for discounting pressure. Dollar hegemony. Europe's banks and firms, deeply integrated into dollar-based systems, are being nudged to explore alternatives, though actual shifts will be gradual unless BRICS act more boldly. Geopolitical ripple effects. A fragmented BRICS, facing external pressure, may offer Europe and the US openings for bilateral agreements on trade, tech, climate, AI, and security. But the unpredictability of US policy muddies the waters, not good for sustained strategy. Conclusion. 8:30 to 9 o'clock. Unlike many puff-piece summaries, this is a story about structure over rhetoric, a shadow game where emerging powers test boundaries while bracing for backlash. The summit isn't about triumphant alternative systems, it's about tightrope walking within constraints. That tightening will directly affect European and American markets. Your audience needs to understand, BRICS are not replacing the global order, but they're probing its limits. And in response, we see strategic containment from US trade policy. That tension is where today's geopolitical economy lives. If you found this valuable, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. How should Europe respond? Push back on tariffs? Seek deeper ties with BRICS? Or focus on internal resilience?